We're back with professional intuitive Carol Ann Lieros, who's author of Intuition Technologies. Carol Ann has gained national recognition for her work helping individuals from every imaginable background to use their psychic ability in everyday life. Carol Ann, almost everyone has had spontaneous ESP experiences. The trick seems to be calling it up intentionally. Now, I remember reading about the Stanford Research Institute in California developing remote viewing. What's been your experience with that?
Well, I have called remote viewing, what has been rebaptized remote viewing, mind traveling for 25 or 30 years. And what I found is that this is a very easy thing for people to be able to begin to use their own psychic ability. If we use the metaphor of the left brain and right brain, the imagination is supposedly a characteristic of the right brain, if we use that metaphor, and so is intuition. And so what I do is I get people to imagine and pretend, and sometimes even guess if that gives them permission to do it. So in the mind traveling or remote viewing, what I do is tell them to imagine, pretend there's a duplicate of themselves standing next to them. And then imagine or pretend projecting that duplicate of themselves, that we'll call the mind, up into the air to go to the place where they want to get information about, usually a place, obviously, they've never been before. And so then while they're hovering over that address, wherever it is, to look around. What is the neighborhood like? What do they see there? What are they aware of? What does it look like, etc.? And then imagine themselves projecting themselves to the door and entering and looking around just as if you were there in the physical body, and pretend you're there. If you were there, what would you notice to your right? What would you notice straight ahead of you? What would you notice to your left? And at first, people say it feels like they're guessing, they're making it up. And that is part of the imagination. You know, it's, okay, I'm going to make this up, I'm going to pretend, I don't think I can do this, so I'm going to make it up. And that seems to give people permission to be able to actually access the intuition. It's sort of like a flow from imagination into intuition. And we do a lot of that in our workshops. And so then they begin to describe what they see there, etc. Then they imagine coming back and so on. Then when they go to that address, whether it's an office or a home, it doesn't matter. When they go there, then they can check out their impressions. So they get the feedback that is so important. And all they've done is imagine and pretend. There's nothing scary about that. We've done that since we were little children.
Now, it seems like what Edgar Cayce did in a way was a kind of remote viewing, especially with his health readings. Have you used your intuition for health information?
Oh, yes, quite often, actually, in the readings I've done over the many 30-some years. I was working with a physician who is an allergist, and this physician didn't want to test some of the patients because they were so highly allergic. And so they would say to me, you know, well, what is this person allergic to, so they could test them for very few things and be ready. So in this one time I remember, I said, oh, I see a mound of white stuff. They're allergic to something that's all white. And the doctor looked at me and said, Carol Ann, that isn't very useful information. Think of how many things are white. And I said, oh, yeah, you're right. How do I know what this mound of white stuff is? Well, what would I do if there actually were a mound of white stuff in front of me? I would wet my finger, touch it, and taste it. So I pretended, again, see, we have that imagination. I touched it, tasted it, and I said, this person is allergic to salt. Very highly allergic to salt. I had never heard of an allergy to salt. And it turned out that was one of their biggest allergies. Then another time, it was part of an experiment we were doing at the college. I was holding an envelope with handwriting in it that was sealed and coded and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, I began to get pains in my chest and down my arm, and I became short of breath. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, I'm having a heart attack. And then, of course, it occurred to me, well, this person, I said, has this person ever had a heart attack? And being a good, you know, experiment, nobody answered me until afterwards when the code was broken. The person who had written that had had a heart attack 6 months before. So I took on the physical symptoms, if you will. But there's the acknowledgement of, this belongs to that other person, not me, and so the symptoms go away.
Now, you've mentioned research, and it seems like parapsychology or the scientific study of these abilities is critical. Tell us a little more about experiments you've been in.
Oh, there's so many of them. Some of them are very boring, some of them were very interesting, and some are very practical. And the one that really most people are interested in, and I like, is the precognition one. We took a group of 150 people who were in a workshop of ours at the college, and we asked the people to write down 3 questions that had to do with something that might be occurring in the next 6 months in their life, if they could do that, and to word the question so it could be answered with yes or no. No big lengthy sentences for, you know. Then I took all of those questions, 150 times 3, into another room in the college, and I answered them, yes or no. Meanwhile, in the classroom, the scientist was saying to the people, all right, now write down your anticipated answers. And so we wanted to see, was I doing telepathy rather than precognition? Well, most of my answers did not agree with theirs, although they had all the data, and so we knew it wasn't telepathy. Then, as they began to give us feedback over the next 6 months, we found out that, indeed, it was precognition, and the results of it came out at millions to 1 against a chance result. And that's how I came to be known as a psychic who's 93 to 97% accurate at predicting the future.
You work with so many different kinds of people. Do people experience ESP in different ways?
Oh, yes, indeed. Some people see, some people hear, some people feel, some people know, some people say, I just knew it. In the seeing, it may be internal or external. So people do it in many different ways, and in fact, most people do it in a variety of ways.
So there's a possibility for multiple modalities in how we experience
Correct. You may see something internally in your mind and have a feeling of what it means.